This video is to go over the new updates to the ExactFlat for Rhino software. The focus of this video is going to be the improvements to the pattern edges, specifically the pattern edge manager, the updates to the notch manager, the updates to the pattern export system, as well as the new options and defaults. We will first start. We have our car seat here. We're going to start by adaptively remeshing. There have been no new updates to the adaptive remesher, so this whole process is business as usual. Click the start button, the part quickly remeshes, and we click OK to accept. From here, we will go ahead and flatten all the parts. And very quickly, we now have our default flat pattern. I'm going to minimize the perspective viewport, maximize the top-down viewport, and quickly do zoom extents. From here, we can see our default pattern. We have one flipped triangle right there indicated by the highlight. We're going to have to correct that before we optimize. We can also see the strain map on the part. And new to ExactFlat is the default pattern edges. So when we zoom in on a part, we can see we have a default pattern edge applied. These cyan dots, they represent the start and end points of individual pattern edges, and the red outline represents the offset of those pattern edges. First, we're going to quickly address the flip triangle here. We're going to just simply use a pre-flattener to get rid of that. Now that that's gone, we can run the optimizer to optimize the strain and sag of all the different pattern pieces. There have been no updates to the optimizer, so this is the same as it's always been. We'll run the optimizer, let it run to completion, and click OK to accept. From here, we're going to arrange our pattern pieces using the find command. So we'll go ahead and start the find command, set our offset to 100 units, and we'll just quickly arrange our pattern. This will make it easier to see the effects of the new changes to the pattern edge manager as well as the notch manager. First up, we have the changes to the pattern edge manager. This is an entirely new tool. In the past, we had a single command, set pattern edges. That has been replaced by the pattern edge tools and the pattern edge manager. So we'll go ahead and we'll open up the pattern edge manager, and right off the bat, we can see all the different pieces here, and each piece has all the different pattern edges listed for it. Under piece 1, we can see we have the very first edge selected, and that is highlighted in the document. As we select the additional edges for this pattern piece, we can see the highlight changing, giving a very clear indication as to which edge is selected and which edge we are going to be modifying. Pattern Edge Manager allows you to adjust the offset as well as the unit system for the offset. So if we change this to 1/2 inch, we can see that preview is updating in real time. We can also independently adjust the start and end conditions for this edge. So if we do not want trim extend turned on, we can go ahead and disable that. And now the start condition is disabled. We can also independently adjust the spike truncation. This is a phenomenon that occurs for pattern pieces that come together, edges that come together at a point. Occasionally, the spike can form there if the offset is great enough. So let's go ahead and we'll create a spike there, and we'll show the effects of this. So we're looking at piece 7. We'll zoom in on this again. Piece 7. We'll adjust this offset to say 1/2 inch. And similarly, we'll adjust this offset to 1/2 inch as well. Now we have a scenario where we have 1/2 inch between this edge and the seam, half an inch between this edge and the seam, but the distance from this vertex to the outer tip over here is quite large. That can be undesirable for some industries. So we've got spike truncation here. If we reduce this to 1 times the length of the seam allowance, we can see it's truncating the spike to, this is a factor based off of the seam offset. So the seam offset is half an inch, so this is going to be half an inch maximum here. And naturally we can turn that on and off, so we have independent controls for every single pattern edge, whether we want spike truncation turned on or off. From within the pattern edge manager, we also have the ability to split and merge pattern edges. So if we want to add additional split points, we can do that right from within the pattern edge manager. Add as many split points as we want. We can also turn on and off split twin, and what this does is it allows us to automatically split the twin pattern piece. So if we turn this on now and we go ahead and add an additional split point, we are now automatically splitting the corresponding location on the twin pattern piece. Instead of having to go back to the pattern edge manager, if we now want to start merging pattern edges, we can simply change the mode right here from the options, the command line. So we'll go ahead and turn this back to merge, and we'll go ahead and we'll undo these split points. And now if we view B7, we have our new additional pattern edges in the pattern edge manager. It can be time consuming to manually adjust all of these settings for every single pattern edge. So we have the ability to apply blanket changes to selected pattern edges using pattern edge templates. This is a new feature to ExactFlat. ExactFlat comes bundled with a number of preset pattern edge templates, although you do have the ability to create your own custom pattern edge templates. Right now, our default template is 1/4 inch. We can go ahead and change that to whatever we want. So if we select 5/8, we now click apply, and we can select our pattern edges. We'll disable apply whole piece. We'll turn that off. And now we can blanket apply pattern edges. You'll notice that as I apply my pattern edge, it is also applying the same pattern edge to the twin pattern piece. This is to save time. This setting is actually controlled in the pattern edge template, and you do have the option to turn this off if you do not wish to do this. New to ExactFlat, we also have the same commands we've always had. So if you simply want to apply a pattern edge without going into the pattern edge manager, we have the set pattern edge properties command. Instead of the properties being displayed on the command line, we now have pattern edge template selector. So once again, you select your template here, and we actually see the details of the template. So this one is apply twins, yes. We're setting our offset as well as our twin offset. The offset and twin offset can be asymmetrical, so if you have a need for an asymmetrical seam, you can do that. You can create that, as well as all the other settings that we've seen. So we'll go ahead and click apply, and now we can start making changes to our pattern edges. If we wanted to very quickly remove all pattern edges from our pattern, we can do that using this command, the delete all pattern edges. This allows you to select one or more pattern piece and remove all pattern edges from that pattern piece. And not only does it set the offset to 0. It also removes all pattern edge split points, so we have no defined pattern edges on these pieces now. We will not be able to set any kind of pattern edge properties on these pieces until we create new pattern edges on them. If we want to restore the default pattern edges to these pattern pieces, we can use this command here. So we'll go ahead and reselect these pieces, and now it restores the default pattern edges. We'll notice it does not restore the edges on the twin pattern pieces. So if we wanted to bring these pieces back into sync, we'll have to run this command on the twin pattern piece as well. We can manage our pattern edge templates using Pattern Edge Template Manager. From here, we have the ability to modify existing pattern edge templates. We can add new pattern edge templates. We can copy existing templates and use them as a base for new templates. And we can also remove any template we wish. So let's go ahead and create a new template. We'll start with half-inch seam. We can create a copy of that, and now we'll give it a new name. We'll call this half-inch async. We'll create an asymmetrical seam here. So we'll have apply twin turned on the first half. We'll create no offset, and on the twin we will add 1/2 inch, and we'll leave trim extend turned on for both. We've made changes, so we're prompted, asked if we want to save changes. We'll go ahead and click yes. Now let's go ahead and set this new seam. 1/2 inch async. We'll apply it to this piece here. So we should have no seam allowance on this side, and we should have 1/2 inch on this side. Now I'll go ahead and I'll just restore these two pieces. Next, I want to show the new changes to the notch manager. We've added a lot of new functionality. Let's go ahead and go to our tools here, and let's open up our notch tag manager. Notch tag manager has seen quite a bit of work done to it. We now have a similar list as we saw in the pattern edge manager. So as we go ahead and create new notches, they're going to show up categorized under their pattern piece. Makes it a little bit easier to find the notches that you're looking for. Similar to the pattern edge manager, we now create notches using templates. So we've got our list of available notch templates here. And you'll also notice that we have a lot of new different notch types available for use. Traditionally, it has simply been slit notch and V-notch. We've added castle, check, crescent, T, and U notch types to ExactFlat. So to demonstrate, let's go ahead. We'll just create some notches here, and we can start showing the new features. So I'll go ahead and I'll create a point notch, and I'll just select the vertex there. As we're all used to, when we create that new notch, it's created both on the selected point as well as the twin point. New to this version of ExactFlat and similar to the Pattern Edge Manager, we now have selected notch highlights. So as you select a notch, you have a visual highlight in the document for where that notch is. We also have the ability to create notch chains. So if you want to create a chain of notches along a pattern edge, you can now do that. We'll go ahead and select a different notch type. We'll create a new chain on this edge here. Some of the new features available for notches are available to both point notches as well as chain notches. Obviously, the first new feature is the addition of the notch types. So again, we've got high notch, V notch, check, T, U, castle, and crescent as available options. Traditionally, a notch will start at the cut line and traverse towards the seam line, inwards towards the piece. We now have the ability to create inverted notches. This is mostly useful for certain notch types such as V, U, and crescent. When used in conjunction with some of the new features of the export pattern system, we can now merge notches as part of the cut line, and this is a very useful way to create quick tags or flaps on your pattern pieces. So we've got new notch types. We can now create inverted notches. As usual, we can adjust the width and the depth of the notch, as well as the unit system for those. And new to ExactFlat, we can also adjust a notch multiple. So if you want to represent certain features on your part by having multiple successive notches in one location, we can do that. So as we change our notch multiple, say we want 3 notches here, we can do that, and now we have 3 notches at that one location. We can adjust the spacing between the notches, the multiples, change this to 1 millimeter, and as we change this value, we can see the changes happening in real time in the document. We can also independently adjust the color of the notch and the notch tag for every single notch in the list. You're no longer stuck having one single color. We can independently adjust those at the notch level, as well as the font face and font size. We can change that independently for every single notch. Traditionally, as we've added notches, the notches are always appended with a unique identifier, and typically it's been numerical. So we've got U0, T1, and as we add new notches, that numerical identifier will increase. We can reset that value now, so we can set the auto increment value, and we can change this to whatever we want. The value that we see here will be the next value used for the new notch. In addition to numbers, we also now have auto-incrementing letters, lowercase letters, and capital letters, and we can adjust the next value independently for all 3 of those types. As we are creating our notches, if we want to change the properties here, if we accidentally created a U notch, but now we want that to actually be castle notch or any other notch type, we can simply select from our list of templates here, and we can change the properties of that notch in real time without having to change all the individual parameters. So now we can see this is now V2, and we can now see we have a V notch. We can create, modify pattern edge templates, same as, or notch templates, the same way we do pattern edge templates using notch template editor. And just as with pattern edge templates, we have the ability to create new templates. We can copy existing templates and modify them, and we can remove templates. Looking at the templates, we have the ability to change the template name. This is the display name in the template editor, as well as the notch template manager. We can change the notch type. We can indicate whether this notch is inverted or not. We can adjust the notch width, the notch depth. We can adjust the notch multiple spacing, the notch color, and because this is a template, we can change the tag format here. If we want to use a lowercase letter, we can change this %n to %a, lowercase a, to indicate lowercase letter, or capital A to insert a capital letter as a sequence. And lastly, as part of the template, we can specify the font face as well as the font size. Going back to the notch manager, we're going to look at some of the specific features for notch chains. When we created this notch chain, it created the chain with 3 notches spaced evenly along the edge. We can set chain specific properties. So we can say that we can change the direction of the chain. Doesn't make so much sense with the settings we have, but let's say we place a notch on the start of the edge. The start is defined as the pattern edge or the pattern piece that we selected. So edges always go in a counterclockwise rotation for the outer edge. We placed our chain on this piece here. So this is going to be the start here. And the twin piece just simply matches that. So now if we change our direction from start to end, let's just go ahead and ignore that for now. So we can choose to place notches on the start point as well as the end point, which has a lot of valid applications, specifically if you have only a single edge on your piece. It allows you to place a notch directly on the start, thus eliminating a gap in your notches. We can change the number of notches that are being placed on that edge. And again, we see the updates in real time. And we can also change whether we want to create the notches using a set number of notches count, or whether we want to place notches at set intervals spacing. So if we change our spacing, now we are placing notches every 12 inches. So now if we click start, we have 1 notch on the start, 12 inches down, we've got another notch, and so on. And as we change this value, we can again see those happening in real time. We're actually going to go back into the notch manager, and we're going to go ahead and create one more notch chain here. Let's do a U notch. And we'll go ahead and we'll create a new U notch along this edge right there. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to change this to an inverted notch. We're going to do this on both pieces, on piece 7, this one right here, and we're going to go ahead and make that change to piece 6 as well. We'll notice that because I've changed the notch on piece 7, those changes have already applied to piece 6. So now that we have our pattern edges and we have our notches, we're going to go ahead and export the pattern. And we'll notice a few new changes to the pattern export system as well. Specifically, we now have the ability to set the desired unit system for our pattern export. So if we want to export this to centimeters, we can. But now we also have template export. We also have the ability to specify the desired unit system within the pattern edge template. We'll also notice that we have a lot of new attributes available, and these do various things. Combine piece curves will essentially group all of your piece curves into one single curve when you export. and we can have a look at the effects of that. Split piece curves allows you to split your pattern piece by a break angle, and we'll have a closer look at that when we look at the pattern edge or the export profile manager. And we also have the ability to combine notches with the cut line. So let's go ahead, I'll actually have a look at the export profile editor, and we can create a couple profiles to demonstrate this functionality. So we'll start with our ExactFlat Classic, and let's go ahead, we'll create a copy of this. For this one, we'll turn on combine piece curves, create another copy, we'll call this split piece curves. And we'll set a break angle of 30 degrees. And for this one, we'll call it combine notches with cut line. So now we have our 3 new templates. We'll go ahead and we'll close that in a moment, but I just want to point out that we now have independent new layers for all of our different new notch types, as well as a new third layer. We now have the ability to export notch line vertices. So we have everything turned on for this profile. We'll go ahead and we'll click yes. So now again, we'll go ahead and open up the export profile selector, and let's go ahead and select these profiles here. First, we'll look at the combined piece one, and we'll go ahead and we'll export this as a DXF. And we'll just change the name here. We'll call that combined piece curves. We'll open this up again. We'll change our profile to split piece curve. And lastly, combine notches. Let's go ahead, we'll change our unit system for this one to demonstrate this capability. And we'll go ahead, we'll export this as meters. Go ahead and click export. Go ahead and we'll have a look at our new patterns. We'll start first with combined piece curves. Because we exported as a DXF, everything was exported as blocks. So to examine our individual pieces, Go to block edit, and now we can examine the individual curves here. So because we combined everything, we can see that our defined pattern edges are no longer separate piece curves. Everything's been combined into one single polyline. Looking at our notches, we can see that our V notch, as expected, travels from the cut line towards the seam line. We can see our notch point, we can see our notch geometry, as well as the notch line vertices. But for our U notch, because we created this as an inverted notch, we now see that this notch is inverted and actually travels away from the seam line. Moving on to our next example, we've got our split piece curves file. Let's go ahead and open this. In this example, all the edges will have been split, where the angle between the two is greater than the specified angle, in this case 30 degrees. Once again, for a V notch, it travels from the cut line towards the seam line, whereas our inverted U notches travel from the cut line away from the seam line. And lastly, we'll have a look at our combined notches file. So we see a pretty big difference for this one. Lock edit for this one. We don't have individual notch geometry on the we do have notch geometry, however, the notches have now been incorporated as part of the cut line. So this is very useful if you want to create tags or flaps on the pattern piece. You can invert your notches and combine them with the cut line. Also new to ExactFlat, we now have the ability to export only the selected pattern pieces. So if no pieces have been selected when the command is started, then all pattern pieces are going to be exported. However, if we select only a few pattern pieces, now we have the option to choose selected pattern pieces or all pattern pieces. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this selected and export. And now if we have a look at this pattern piece, this file, we're only going to see the 3 pieces in it. Finally, let's have a look at the ExactFlat options. There are a few new options here to support all the new changes that have been made. First, we now have our default pattern edge template. This is the template that is automatically applied to the pattern pieces after converting. We can pick any of our templates. Second, the pattern export section has been updated. A lot of the settings have been removed since they are no longer valid. However, we do have the text size, font, and font face options here. These are applicable to our piece tags. And we now also have the default export profile option. We have 2 new settings under highlights. We now have the ability to change pattern edge highlight color and size, as well as the notch highlight color and size.